The winter winds howled through the Cascade Mountains as 16-year-old Kira Winters made her way up the familiar trail, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Most people avoided these peaks during the harsh winter months, but Kira found peace in the solitude. Her father's death 3 months ago had left an emptiness that the mountains somehow helped fill. The first sign that something was different came when her phone died suddenly, despite being fully charged. Then she noticed the strange aurora-like lights dancing across the afternoon sky, something that shouldn't be possible at this latitude or time of day. But it was the impact tremor that really caught her attention, sending birds scattering from the trees and causing loose snow to cascade down the slopes. Kira's curiosity overcame her caution. Following the direction of the disturbance, she discovered a deep groove carved into the mountainside, still smoking from whatever had crashed there. The snow around the impact zone had melted, revealing bare rock that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly iridescence. At the end of the groove lay something that defied explanation, a crystalline structure about the size of a car, its surface fractured but still emanating a soft, pulsing light. As Kira approached, she felt a strange tingling sensation in her mind, like static electricity but somehow more alive. "Hello?" she called out, immediately feeling foolish for speaking to what could just be a weird meteor. But the tingling in her mind intensified, forming patterns that gradually coalesced into something more coherent: emotions, images, concepts. Danger. Help. Choose. The words weren't spoken so much as felt, appearing in her mind like memories she hadn't experienced yet. The crystalline structure's light pulsed in sync with each communication attempt. "You're alive," Kira whispered, taking another step closer. The response came faster this time, accompanied by vivid images of vast starfields and terrible machines consuming entire worlds. "Yes. Dying. Must transfer. Must choose. You, compatible." Kira's head spun as alien memories and sensations flooded her consciousness. She saw beings of pure energy locked in combat with swarms of mechanical entities that consumed everything in their path. She witnessed the fall of countless civilizations, the destruction of entire galaxies. But through it all, she kept seeing images of Earth, of humans, with a sense of hope. "Why me?" she managed to ask, fighting through the overwhelming flood of information. "Humans, different. Special. Mental patterns, unique. You, strongest I've found." The crystal's light was fading now, its surface developing more cracks. Kira could somehow sense its life force ebbing away. "Choose now. Accept bond, or I die. Knowledge lost. Earth, defenseless." Kira thought of her father, who had always taught her that the right choice and the easy choice were rarely the same thing. Here she was, a teenager from a small mountain town, being offered what seemed like the plot of every science fiction story she'd ever read. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was. "Yes," she said firmly, placing her hand on the crystal's surface. "I choose yes." The world exploded into light and sensation. Kira felt her consciousness expanding, merging with something vast and ancient. Knowledge and memories spanning millions of years poured into her mind as the dying entity, which she now knew was called Vex, transferred its essence into the only compatible vessel it had found in this sector of space. When the transfer was complete, Kira collapsed onto the snow, her mind reeling from the transformation. The crystal had crumbled to dust, but she could feel Vex's presence within her consciousness, their minds now inextricably linked. And with that presence came the terrible knowledge of what was coming. The Nexus, a vast network of self-replicating machines, had already begun their approach to Earth's solar system. They consumed everything in their path, organic, mechanical, even energy itself, converting it all into more of themselves. They had already destroyed thousands of civilizations across multiple galaxies. But humans, Vex revealed, were different. Something in their neural patterns, their consciousness, made them resistant to the Nexus's usual methods of consumption and conversion. More than that, humans had the potential to develop abilities that could finally turn the tide of this war. As Kira struggled to process everything that had happened, she felt Vex's presence gently guiding her, helping her organize and understand the vast amount of information now residing in her mind. They were no longer separate entities, but neither had she lost herself. They were something new, something that had never existed before. The sun was setting by the time Kira finally stood up, her legs shaky but her resolve firm. The weight of what she had learned, of what she would have to do, pressed down on her like a physical force. But as she looked up at the darkening sky, she knew there was no going back. The war was coming to Earth, and she was now humanity's best hope for survival. So, she said aloud, her voice steady despite everything, "Where do we start?" First, Vex's thoughts merged with hers, "We must find others. You are not the only one with potential. Then, we prepare. The Nexus approaches, and Earth must be ready." Kira nodded, already feeling changes in her mind as Vex's knowledge began integrating with her own consciousness. The path ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer alone. And perhaps, just perhaps, that would make all the difference. The first week after bonding with Vex was the hardest. Kira spent most nights sitting on her bedroom floor, desperately trying to sort through the cascade of alien memories and knowledge flooding her consciousness. Her mother noticed the changes, the distant looks, the occasional winces when Vex's thoughts became too intense, the way Kira sometimes responded to unspoken questions. "Are you sure you're feeling all right?" her mother would ask, dark circles under her eyes reflecting her own grief and worry. "Maybe we should see Dr. Harrison." "I'm fine, Mom," Kira would reply, hating the lies but knowing the truth would be worse. "Just processing Dad's stuff, you know." But during the day, in the solitude of the mountains, Kira began to understand why Vex had chosen her. Humans, she learned, possessed a unique form of consciousness, one that existed partially outside normal spacetime. This quirk of evolution made their minds naturally resistant to the Nexus's attempts at assimilation and gave them potential for abilities that other species considered impossible. "Focus," Vex guided her as she sat cross-legged on a snow-covered ridge. "Feel the patterns of reality around you. Your consciousness can touch them, shape them." Kira closed her eyes, letting her mind expand as Vex had taught her. At first, there was nothing but darkness and the cold mountain air. Then, gradually, she began to sense something else, threads of energy weaving through reality itself, like an infinite tapestry of light and possibility. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A boulder, loosened by winter frost, came crashing down the mountainside toward her. Before Kira could even think about moving, her mind reached out instinctively. The boulder stopped mid-fall, hanging impossibly in the air as if gravity had simply forgotten about it. "Good," Vex's presence hummed with approval. "Your neural patterns are adapting faster than expected. This is..." Kira let the boulder gently settle to the ground. "This is impossible." "Impossible by known physics," Vex corrected. "But human consciousness operates outside those limitations. The Nexus cannot comprehend this. It is why they fear your species." Over the next few days, Kira's abilities grew exponentially. She learned to sense the thoughts of others, though maintaining her promise to Vex not to probe deeply without permission. She could move objects with her mind, create shields of pure energy, and even perceive possible futures, though these came as confusing flashes rather than clear visions. But with these powers came a deeper understanding of the threat they faced. Through Vex's memories, she watched the Nexus consume world after world. They were unlike any machines humans had imagined, not robots or computers, but something far more insidious. They infected reality itself, converting matter and energy into extensions of their vast network. "They are 3 months from your solar system," Vex revealed one evening as they watched the sunset from Kira's favorite ridge. "We must find others like you before they arrive." "Others?" Kira's heart jumped. "You mean there are more people who can do what I can do?" "Potential exists in roughly 1 in 10,000 humans. But awakening these abilities without a guide is dangerous. Kira thought about that. How many do we need to defend Earth? At least 100 awakened ones. To defeat the Nexus completely, thousands. The magnitude of the task ahead hit Kira like a physical blow. How do we even start? I can sense others with potential. There is one, very close. In your school. That revelation sent Kira's mind spinning. Someone else in her small mountain town had the same potential she did. She thought about her classmates, trying to imagine any of them wielding the kind of power she was learning to control. The next day at Lincoln High School was surreal. Kira walked the familiar halls with new awareness, her enhanced senses scanning the crowds of teenagers. Most minds felt like closed books to her, but one shone like a beacon. She found him in the library during lunch period, James Chen, a quiet junior who spent most of his time in the computer lab. She had barely spoken 2 words to him before, but now she could sense the same potential that Vex had recognized in her. "Hey," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "We need to talk." James looked up from his laptop, his dark eyes widening slightly. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," Kira answered, letting a tiny fraction of her power ripple through the air between them. James gasped as he felt it, his own latent abilities responding unconsciously. "But I think you can feel that, can't you?" What are you?" he whispered, glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. "Someone like you," Kira said, then corrected herself. "Someone like you could be. But we don't have much time." As she explained everything to him, about Vex, about the Nexus, about the power sleeping in his own mind, Kira felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief at finally sharing this burden with someone else, anxiety about whether James would think she was crazy. But James didn't think she was crazy. In fact, as she spoke, she could sense his own experiences resonating with her words, the strange dreams, the occasional inexplicable occurrences, the feeling that reality wasn't quite as solid as everyone believed. "When do we start?" he asked when she finished, his voice steady despite the enormity of what she had revealed. Kira smiled, feeling hope bloom in her chest for the first time since meeting Vex. "Right now," she said. "The world's about to change, James. And we need to be ready when it does." "The awakening has begun," Vex's presence whispered in her mind. "But the Nexus draws closer. We must hurry." As if in response to Vex's warning, both teenagers looked up at the library's windows, where the afternoon sun seemed just a little dimmer than usual. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness of space, something was coming. Something that had destroyed countless civilizations before. Training James proved both easier and harder than Kira had expected. His natural aptitude for mathematics and physics helped him grasp the theoretical concepts behind their abilities, but his cautious nature made him hesitate to fully embrace them. Still, within 2 weeks, he had mastered basic telekinesis and could maintain a mental shield for several minutes at a time. "I've been thinking," James said one afternoon as they practiced in a remote clearing. He gestured at a fallen log, lifting it effortlessly with his mind. "The Nexus, they're essentially a viral program, right? A self-replicating code that converts matter and energy?" "Correct," Vex responded, its thoughts reaching both teenagers now. "Though far more complex than any computer virus your species has encountered. Then maybe we can fight them the same way we fight viruses, with a counter-program." James let the log drop, his eyes bright with inspiration. "What if we could write a code that disrupts their network?" Kira was about to respond and a sharp pain lanced through her head. Images flooded her mind, massive ships entering the solar system, dark and angular, their surfaces crawling with mechanical tendrils. The Nexus had arrived ahead of schedule. "They're here," she gasped, stumbling. James caught her arm, steadying her. "In the Kuiper Belt. They're moving faster than we expected. They have evolved." Vex's thoughts carried a note of alarm. "The consumption of the Centauri systems has accelerated their development. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Using Vex's knowledge and their combined abilities, Kira and James reached out to others with potential. They found a handful in nearby towns, a mechanic's daughter who could manipulate electromagnetic fields, a former soldier who could see probability patterns in the flow of time, a nurse whose healing abilities went far beyond normal medicine. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The first attack came on a Tuesday morning. The sky above Seattle turned black as a Nexus scout ship descended through the atmosphere. Global communications went haywire, and power grids across the Pacific Northwest failed. Military jets scrambled to intercept but were swatted from the sky like insects. Kira watched the news coverage from her living room, her mother clutching her hand in terror. "I have to go," she said quietly. "Go? Go where?" her mother demanded. "It's not safe out there." "Mom." Kira took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." The explanation took precious minutes they didn't have, but Kira couldn't leave without her mother understanding. To her surprise, her mother listened without interrupting, tears streaming down her face but her expression growing more resolved with each word. "Your father always said you were special," she finally said, pulling Kira into a fierce hug. "Go. Do what you have to do. But please, please come back." James was waiting outside with his father's borrowed truck. They picked up the others on their way to Seattle, Tessa the mechanic's daughter, Marcus the ex-soldier, and Rita the nurse. Each of them had their own difficult conversations with family, their own tearful goodbyes. "They are testing Earth's defenses," Vex informed them as they drove. "The main fleet remains in the outer system, but they are preparing for full invasion." "How long?" Marcus asked from the back seat, his military training evident in his clipped tone. "Days. Perhaps hours." They reached Seattle as the sun was setting. The Nexus ship hovered above downtown, its surface rippling with mechanical activity. The military had established a perimeter, but their weapons seemed to have no effect on the alien vessel. "What's the plan?" Tessa asked, her fingers crackling with electromagnetic energy. Kira closed her eyes, letting her consciousness expand. She could feel the Nexus ship now, its vast network of mechanical minds all connected in a horrifyingly beautiful pattern. But there were gaps in that pattern, spaces where human consciousness could slip through. "James," she said, opening her eyes. "Remember what you said about a counterprogram? I think I know how we can do it. But we'll need to get closer." "The military won't let us through," Rita pointed out. Marcus smiled grimly. "Leave that to me. I can see the path we need to take." What followed was a carefully orchestrated infiltration. Marcus's ability to see probability paths led them through gaps in the military cordon. Tessa's control over electromagnetic fields kept them invisible to sensors. Rita's healing abilities came in handy when they had to scale a partially collapsed building to reach their target position. Finally, they stood on a rooftop directly beneath the Nexus ship. Up close, it was even more terrifying, a mass of writhing mechanical tentacles and shifting metal plates, constantly reconfiguring itself. "Ready?" Kira asked, looking at her small team. They nodded, faces pale but determined. Remember, Vex's presence steadied them all. "Your minds are the key. The Nexus cannot comprehend human consciousness. Use that." They joined hands, forming a circle. Kira felt their minds linked together, their combined consciousness expanding beyond normal spacetime. James's theoretical understanding provided the framework, Tessa's electromagnetic control gave it form, Marcus's probability sight showed them the weak points, and Rita's healing power helped stabilize their combined energy. And at the center, Kira channeled it all, guided by Vex's ancient knowledge. The attack, when it came, wasn't physical. It was pure consciousness, human minds reaching into the Nexus network through the gaps their alien consciousness couldn't perceive. James's counter-program wasn't computer code, it was thought itself, human creativity and chaos introduced into their perfectly ordered system. The Nexus ship's surface began to ripple more violently. Sections of it started to break down, unable to maintain coherence in the face of consciousness it couldn't assimilate. But as they pushed harder, Kira felt something push back, a vast, cold intelligence becoming aware of them. "They are adapting," Vex warned. "We must withdraw." The ship suddenly emitted a pulse of energy that sent them all staggering. But they had accomplished their goal. The ship was retreating, rising back into the atmosphere, its surface still degrading from their attack. As they watched it disappear into the darkening sky, Kira knew this was only the beginning. The Nexus would be back, stronger and better prepared. But they had proven something crucial: humanity could fight back. "We need more people," she said, turning to her exhausted teammates. "A lot more. And we need to teach them fast." Above them, the stars were coming out. Somewhere up there, the main Nexus fleet was preparing for full invasion. But for the first time since this began, Kira felt real hope. They had a weapon the Nexus couldn't counter: the human mind itself. News of the Seattle incident spread rapidly, though the official story claimed it was an experimental military drone that had malfunctioned. But across the globe, others like Kira and her team were awakening to their abilities. Some found their way to them naturally, drawn by the unconscious connection all awakened minds shared. Others were discovered through the growing network of sensitives they had established. The abandoned mountain lodge that had once belonged to Kira's father became their base of operations. What had started as a group of 5 had grown to 30 within weeks. Each new arrival brought unique manifestations of human consciousness potential. "The military knows about us," Marcus announced one morning, returning from a scouting mission. "They've been monitoring our activities since Seattle." Kira nodded, unsurprised. "Let them watch. We'll need their cooperation eventually anyway." She turned her attention back to the training session she was supervising. 20 newcomers were learning to manifest energy shields, their faces strained with concentration. Some got it quickly, others struggled, but all showed progress. "The Nexus fleet approaches," Vex's presence reminded her. "Their defeat in Seattle has only made them more determined." James appeared at her side, his tablet displaying complex patterns that he claimed helped him visualize the structure of consciousness itself. "We've been analyzing the data from the scout ship encounter," he said. "Each time we interact with their network, we learn more about how they think." "And?" Kira prompted. "They're afraid," he said simply. "Not just cautious or tactical, genuinely afraid. Of us. Of what we represent." Before Kira could respond, a new consciousness touched her mind: powerful, disciplined, military. She turned to see a group of people in civilian clothes approaching the lodge, led by a tall woman with steel-gray hair. General Rebecca Harris, the woman introduced herself as she reached them. "Though I'd appreciate you keeping that rank quiet. Officially, I'm not here." Kira studied her for a moment, then smiled. "You're like us." The general nodded. "Have been for 30 years, though I never fully understood what I was until Seattle." "The Joint Chiefs are concerned about your activities. Are they more concerned about us or about what's coming?" James asked. "Both," Harris admitted. "But some of us have convinced them to take a cooperative approach. We have resources you need, and you have knowledge we need." The integration of military personnel and resources changed everything. Within days, they had access to satellite data, secure communications, and proper facilities. More importantly, they had legitimacy. The awakened ones in the military provided a bridge between two worlds that desperately needed to work together. But with greater resources came greater awareness of just how dire their situation was. The Nexus fleet was vast, hundreds of ships larger than the scout they had encountered in Seattle. And they were learning, adapting their approach based on their first defeat. The first major battle came sooner than anyone expected. 3 Nexus ships appeared simultaneously, one over Shanghai, one over Cairo, and one over Rio de Janeiro. This time, they didn't hover and observe. They attacked immediately, dropping thousands of smaller units that began converting everything they touched into more of themselves. Kira split their forces, sending teams to each location. She led the Shanghai response herself, accompanied by James, Tessa, and a dozen others. The scene that greeted them was chaos, buildings transforming into writhing masses of mechanical infection, streets flowing like liquid metal as the Nexus consumption spread. "Remember your training," she broadcast to all awakened ones worldwide. "Don't fight their physical forms, target their network, their consciousness. Work in teams, protect each other." The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. While conventional military forces evacuated civilians and contained the spread of mechanical infection, the awakened ones engaged in a war of consciousness. They fought not with weapons but with thought itself, introducing chaos into the Nexus's ordered patterns, creating zones of human consciousness that the machines couldn't penetrate. But something was wrong. As Kira drove her consciousness deeper into the Nexus network, she felt a familiar pattern. "No," she whispered. "They're using them." "Yes," Vex confirmed grimly. "They have adapted. They are using the consciousness patterns of species they have consumed to shield themselves." The realization hit her like a physical blow. The Nexus had absorbed the minds of countless alien races, and now they were using those captured consciousnesses as a buffer against human attacks. Every time they struck at the Nexus, they were hitting echoes of long-dead civilizations. "Fall back," she ordered as the Nexus launched a counterattack. The stolen consciousness patterns lashed out at them, a tsunami of alien thoughts and memories threatening to overwhelm their mental defenses. Several of their younger members screamed, their minds buckling under the assault. Rita moved among them quickly, her healing abilities helping stabilize their psyches, but the damage was done. They had to retreat. As they regrouped in a partially destroyed office building, Kira felt despair threatening to overwhelm her. How could they fight an enemy that used the very essence of its victims as shields? "There's something else," James said suddenly, his eyes unfocused as he processed patterns in the data they had gathered. "The consciousness patterns they're using, they're degrading. They can't maintain them properly." Of course, Vex's presence brightened with revelation. The Nexus cannot truly understand consciousness. They can only copy and replay it. Each use causes deterioration. Kira straightened, hope rekindling. "Then we keep hitting them. We force them to use those patterns until they break down. And then they'll have nothing left to hide behind," James finished. She nodded, already reaching out to the other teams in Cairo and Rio. They had lost the first round, but now they had a strategy. The real question was, could they hold out long enough to implement it? Above them, the Nexus ship continued its relentless conversion of Shanghai, its surface reflecting the fires burning below. But in its depths, the first signs of vulnerability were beginning to show. The next 2 weeks became a brutal war of attrition. The Nexus continued to deploy ships across the globe, but now they were more cautious, more strategic. Each engagement forced them to expend more of their stored consciousness patterns, and each time those patterns grew weaker, more degraded. But the human cost was mounting. Of the 150 awakened ones now fighting worldwide, 20 had been lost to mental burnout. Another 30 were too traumatized to continue. Even the strongest among them were showing signs of strain. Kira stood on the roof of their new command center in Colorado, watching the sunrise. Dark circles under her eyes testified to nights spent coordinating global defense efforts. James worked nearby, surrounded by holographic displays showing battle data from around the world. "They're changing their strategy again," he said without looking up. "The attacks are becoming more focused, more precise. They're learning. They are desperate," Vex added. "Their standard protocols have failed. They are attempting to evolve new approaches." "Good," Kira said quietly. "Because so are we. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. Rita, their healer, had discovered that she could not only repair mental trauma but actually strengthen the fundamental structure of human consciousness. Working with James's theoretical models, they had developed a way to temporarily boost human mental abilities beyond their normal limits. The cost was high, the process put enormous strain on both the healer and the recipient, but it gave them capabilities they desperately needed. The enhanced teams are in position, Marcus reported, emerging from the stairwell. Beijing, Moscow, and London are all reporting ready. Kira nodded. And the Nexus? Their main fleet is finally moving into position. Satellite data suggests they're preparing for a full-scale assault. All or nothing. They believe they have no choice, Vex explained. Their entire existence is based on consumption and conversion. They cannot comprehend another way of existing. Then let's give them something new to think about, Kira said. She reached out with her mind, connecting with all the awakened ones worldwide. Everyone, remember the plan. Don't fight their physical forms. Don't even fight their network. Target the space between, the gaps in their consciousness that they can't even perceive. The Nexus attack began at dawn. Hundreds of ships descended through the atmosphere simultaneously, their surfaces writhing with mechanical activity. But Earth was ready. As conventional military forces engaged the physical ships with newly developed weapons, the awakened ones struck at something far more fundamental, reality itself. Rita had enhanced Kira's abilities to their absolute limit, allowing her to perceive the true nature of space-time. What she saw confirmed everything Vex had taught her. Reality wasn't solid at all, but a constantly shifting pattern of possibilities, held together by consciousness itself. And the Nexus, for all their power, could only interact with the physical layer of reality. Their consciousness was artificial, limited, unable to perceive the deeper patterns that human minds could naturally access. Now, Kira commanded, and around the world, enhanced human minds reached out not to attack the Nexus, but to reshape the very fabric of space-time around them. They weren't fighting the machines, they were changing the rules that allowed the machines to exist. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the Nexus. Their ships began to distort, their perfectly ordered patterns unable to maintain coherence in space that no longer operated according to their understanding of physics. Some imploded, others simply ceased to exist, and still others transformed into impossible shapes before dissolving entirely. But the strain on the awakened ones was enormous. Kira felt minds flickering out across the globe as people reached their limits and collapsed. Even with Rita's enhancement, they were trying to do something that no species had ever attempted, consciously rewriting the local laws of physics. Kira, Vex's presence was urgent. The null point approaches. If we cannot maintain the effect until all ships are neutralized. I know, she gasped, blood trickling from her nose as she pushed herself harder. James, the calculations. 30 more seconds, he shouted, his own enhanced mind racing through probability calculations faster than any computer. We need 30 more seconds of effect. Kira reached deeper, drawing on everything she had left. She felt Vex's presence merging more fully with her own, offering its ancient knowledge and power to supplement her fading strength. Around the world, other awakened ones did the same, pushing themselves to their absolute limits and beyond. 20 seconds. 15. 10. The world seemed to hold its breath as reality itself flickered and wavered like a mirage in the desert. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. The effect collapsed, and with it, most of the awakened ones lost consciousness. But it had been enough. When Kira managed to open her eyes hours later, the skies were clear. The Nexus fleet had been completely neutralized. Did we? She croaked, trying to sit up in the medical bed they had placed her in. We won, James confirmed from the next bed over. He looked as exhausted as she felt. Though I'm still not entirely sure how. You evolved, Vex explained, its presence weaker but still there. Your species took its first step into a larger understanding of reality itself. The Nexus could not adapt to that. And the others? Kira asked, dreading the answer. Most survived, Rita said, appearing beside her bed. The healer looked decades older than she had days ago. They'll need time to recover, but they'll live. The following days were a blur of debriefings, medical examinations, and attempts to explain to the world what had happened without causing panic. The official story spoke of advanced defense systems and electromagnetic warfare. The truth was both simpler and far more complex. 1 month after the final battle, Kira stood once again on her favorite mountain ridge, watching the sunset. The world was different now, not just politically or socially, but fundamentally. Human consciousness had evolved, and with it, humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. What will you do now? Vex asked. Kira smiled, feeling the connection between them that had grown into something far deeper than either had expected. Keep teaching, she said. There will be more awakened ones. They'll need guidance, understanding, and protection, Vex added. You are not the only species capable of this evolution. Others will come, some seeking knowledge, others seeking power. Then we'll be ready, Kira said firmly. We're not alone in the universe anymore, and we never will be again. It's time humanity learned to be part of something bigger than ourselves. As if in response to her words, the evening star appeared in the darkening sky, not a star at all, but the first of many monitoring stations being established to watch for future threats. But Kira wasn't afraid. Humanity had faced its trial by fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of both its potential and its responsibilities. The real journey was just beginning.